protection comes from you, and the outpouring of blessings comes from you. Lord, so right now we ask that you would open up the windows and pour out your Spirit.
Hi, everyone. Please allow me to tell you a little bit about our next speaker. Heather Maynard wears a lot of hats and roles in our community, in our church, and within the United Pentecostal Church International. She is the wife of Anthony, our pastor here at Firstborn. She's the mother of Peyton and the daughter of David and Mona Knowlton. She serves alongside her husband as the president of Illinois Youth Ministries. She is the Section 11 Ladies Ministry Director. Heather is the pharmacy technician at Swedish American Hospital, where she works in the specialty clinic, helping those fighting with cancer and other terminal illnesses. She has written devotionals which have been published in the UPCI and articles which have been used on a national basis in the healthcare industry. She is a part of the Ladies Ministry team at Firstborn Ministries, as well as the First Impressions Director. I'm likely missing the titles to other important roles that she manages so well, but the role I'm most thankful for is that Heather Maynard is my friend. If you didn't notice, each job title I listed had one common theme. Heather has dedicated her life to serving. She enjoys teaching Bible studies. She loves to come alongside women, linking arms and doing what she can to equip them to be successful in their walk with the Lord and in their ministry God has called them to. She loves people without an agenda and is genuinely happy seeing people thrive as they walk in the will of God. Heather loves to be an encourager. I know all this all to be true because she's done all this to me. I'm excited to hear what the Lord has placed on her heart to share with us, and I know you are too. So please help me welcome Heather Maynard.
Good morning, ladies. Aren't we having a wonderful refresh conference so far this year? Just so enjoyed the word that we heard last night, as well as this morning from Sister Cox. Just awesome, awesome presence of the Lord that's here. And what I'm going to speak about today just flows right with what Sister McKee started, what Sister Cox talked about this morning, a couple of the things, same thoughts. And when you're going to speak, you're like, oh, don't talk about what I'm going to talk about. Don't talk about what I'm going to talk about. But you just know that's God confirming it. And one of the other ladies that's speaking today, she had shared with me also that Sister McKee had touched on many of the things that she's going to talk about in her class. And I said, that's okay. I said, that's just God confirming that this is what we need in our hearts this year. And I said, we're ladies. Sometimes we need to hear things different ways for it to really stick. I don't know about you, but I could be pretty stubborn. And so sometimes we need to hear it over and over and over again for it to really stick into our lives. And so this morning, what I want to talk about just for a little while here is having an available heart. Having an available heart. And I'm going to be reading from 1 Kings. You don't have to stand. It's a long passage. I'm going to be reading from 1 Kings 17, 8 through 16. It says, and I'm not going to act it out like Sister McKee, because that's not my personality, so just don't go to sleep on me. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. So he arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, behold, the widow woman was there gathering of sticks. And he called to her and said, Fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel, that I may drink. And as she was going to fetch it, he called to her and said, Bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thine hand. And he said, As the Lord thy God liveth, or she said, I'm sorry, as the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but an handful of meal in a barrel, and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I am gathering 2 sticks, that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. And Elijah said unto her, Fear not, go and do as thou hast said, but make me thereof a little cake first, and bring it unto me, and after make of thee and for thy son. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, the barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil faint, unto the day of the Lord sendeth rain upon thee. And she went and did according to the saying of Elijah, and she and he and all her house did eat many days. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Elijah. So, an available heart. What does it mean to be available? Being available means able to be used at someone's disposal, not otherwise occupied, free to do something. Having an available heart is to allow God to use us for his glory, to do anything he asks us to do. Anything he asked us to do. I know there are certain things that we all pray, at least maybe, hopefully it's not just me. God, don't send me to Africa. I have no desire to go to Africa. I love those people. There are people like anywhere else. I just don't want to go there. It's because of the bugs, the spiders, all the wild animals. I just don't want to deal with those things. But I'm thankful for people like Jason McKay, who feels called to go there, and he goes as often as he's able to. That's an available heart. A heart that's truly available doesn't put limits or caps on what they will do for the Lord. We cannot live in offense, though, and have a completely available heart for God. I think sometimes we try to hold on, to some things. We hold on to hurts because we think somewhere along the lines, we might need these later. Maybe we can use them somehow to benefit us. Like, well, Lord, I can't really reach out to this person, or I can't be a help in this ministry because so-and-so's involved in it, and you remember what they did to me. Then that becomes an excuse for us to sit on the sidelines and to do nothing. In our scripture reading, when Elijah came into town and asked the widow woman for a drink of water and something to eat, can you imagine how she felt? I don't know about you, but I don't know what it feels like to be on my very last meal for my family and not know where the next meal was coming from. Sure, we had some times when we were first married that we didn't have a whole lot. And we like to sometimes kind of reminisce about those times because, we just think it's funny. And we just didn't have a whole lot for entertainment. We'd go to the library and we'd rent DVDs and things like that. There was no Netflix, and if there was, we didn't have money for it. We couldn't even think about affording the internet. Anthony would have phone conferences for IYM back when we were first elected as the sectional youth director, and he would have to go and sit at McDonald's because all of the information that they would send to him would be on the internet, and they were going over it over the phone conference, and we just couldn't afford it. We would stay home quite a bit, so we didn't use extra gas, going places. And what we used to do when we wanted to really go and have a good time, we would go and walk around at the mall. That was like our fun thing to do. And when Peyton was really little, he liked those pretzels from Auntie Anne's. So we'd get a couple of those and share them. That would be our splurge moment. And we just, when you're first married, you have little kids, you just don't have a lot of money. And I remember my mom, she must have knew that we didn't have a lot of money because she, every once in a while, every other week or something like that, she'd come over and she'd drop off like a big bag of ground beef or a 5-pound bag of chicken breast, and that was helpful. We were thankful for that. I'm sure the widow woman would have liked for somebody right about then to drop off a bag of chicken breast to her. But most of us, we don't know what it's like to be down to our last meal, do we? I mean, we just don't. And unlike the widow woman, I had somebody else that I could depend on, someone that could help me figure out what we were going to do. I had my husband. And it doesn't say in the Bible how long the woman had been a widow. For all we know, her husband could have died as a result of the drought and famine that was going on. It could have been something that was fresh and new to her. But no matter how long ago she lost her husband, there's no doubt in my mind that she was grieving his loss. She was left alone to care for herself and their son. What a failure she must have felt like. They were down to their last meal, and then they were going to starve to death. She, of all people, had a reason not to have an available heart. She could have told Elijah, hey, buddy, you take a hike. And none of us would have batted an eye at her because she was protecting her son. She chose, however, to make herself available to God. She chose not to be offended when this stranger asked her to cook him his last meal. Sometimes I think we forget that the characters in the stories embedded in the Old Testament are people just like us. She had hopes, she had dreams, she believed, she doubted, she felt joy, she experienced despair. She suffered real pain, and she didn't know what would happen next. Also, what she didn't know, though, was that God had already chosen her to be a part of something more wonderful than anything her broken heart could have ever imagined. God had chosen this weak and broken lady to be a part of something that would influence people of faith down through eternity. We meet the widow at the city gates. She's gathering sticks to make a fire for what you could consider her funeral meal. A stranger, who we know as Elijah, asked her for a drink of water. The widow's response to this first request is amazing. Why? Because she steps out of her own suffering to provide this man she doesn't even know with a drink. This says something about her. First, it probably indicated to Elijah that this was the right woman that he was looking for. Second, it indicates that this woman was a very unselfish giver. If you were hungry, suffering, facing death, and someone asked you for a favor, how would you react? If this was your best day and your pantry was full and you were out walking, how many of us would go back home and get a bottle of water for a stranger? Just some things to think about. But then Elijah, he takes this request even farther. Shockingly, he asks this woman, who has nothing but a little flour and a little oil, to bring some bread with the water. I could imagine the woman screaming, "Bread? Homeboy, I know you're not from here. You must be crazy. I'm all by myself. There's famine everywhere, and you're asking me for bread?" She responds, "As the Lord your God gives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. And now I'm gathering a couple of sticks that I may go in and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." This is when the story turns. Elijah declares, "For thus says the Lord God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be spent, and the jug of oil shall not be empty until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth." The story concludes with a blessing, and she and he and her household ate for many days. Will the widow do what makes sense and keep the oil for herself and her son? Or will she trust God with the last thing that she has on this earth? This sweet widow, she was at the end of her rope, she chose to make this prophet his requested cake. What would you have done? If we're honest with ourselves, many of us would have kept the ingredients to ourselves. But by acting in faith, the widow not only made Elijah a cake, but she made a cake for her and her son, and she was able to make many meals for all of them because the flour and the oil didn't run out. The blessings of the endless flour is a physical picture that the giver of life had invaded her life by his grace. Long before she had eaten his provision, he had chosen her not only experience life, but to be an instrument to the prophet's continuing life in ministry. God often asks us to offer what is left, to do with it greater than our minds could ever imagine. The widow had to give everything that she had in order to make her heart available for what God wanted to do. But the story is not over. This story would have been amazing enough if it had stopped right there. Can you imagine having flour and oil in your house, and every time you go to make meal after meal, maybe it was the bag of chicken breast, every time you go to the freezer, there's only 2 left or 3 left, one for me, one for my son, one for the prophet. You make it, you go back for the next meal, and it's there again. Can you imagine that? What an amazing miracle that God provided to this widow because she made her heart available to him. But the story doesn't end there. It takes a more dramatic turn than we would expect. All of a sudden, the widow's son comes down with what would seem to be a terminal illness. The physical signs in the passage would tell us that he's dying. Why in the world would God allow this to happen? Does it make any sense to provide endless provisions for the boy's sustenance and then allow him to die immediately afterwards? Shouldn't God be rewarding the widow for her act of faithfulness? But this was a divine calling. What do I mean by that? God had chosen this poor widow and her son to be included in a prophecy about the most significant event that would ever happen in history. God had chosen for her to be an actual living witness to death and resurrection. Through the widow of Zarephath, God would declare himself not only to be the giver of life in terms of making provisions for the needs of his children, but as the giver of life who could do what no person could ever do, defeat death. The prophet lays himself on the body of the boy, cries out for God to give him life, and the boy begins to breathe again so that the prophet can deliver the son back to his mother. Put yourself on the scene of the story. How discouraging. They're going to die. Then God provides a miracle. How amazing. Then depressing. He's going to die again. Then incredible, because God provides a miracle that she could never think of. When she went out to pick up the sticks for her last meal, the widow of Zarephath had no idea of the incredible turn her life would take. It would not be her last day, because what was lurking over her wasn't the shadow of death, but the giver of life, who would not only give her life, but through her preach to all who would believe. And it all began with a stranger's seemingly outrageous request, followed by a faithful act of obedience. If we want God to use us in extraordinary ways, we need to make sure our hearts are completely available to him. We need to be empty of the things of this world and full of the things of God. Psalms 25:15 says, "My eyes are ever toward the Lord." How do we make sure we're always full of the things of God? Well, it's kind of like teaching a kid how to ride a bike. when you're teaching them how to steer, you look in the direction that you want to go, and that's where the rest of your body is going to go. You want to be full of the things of God? Keep your head, your heart, your mind on Him. The thoughts we allow to take up residence in our head determine the direction the rest of our lives will go. As ladies, we are often led by our emotions. Guess what? Thoughts fuel emotions. Emotions, or what we would call our heart, they can't be trusted. Jeremiah 17:9 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?" Whoever came up with the phrase, "just follow your heart," that is dumb advice. The heart's wicked. We have to constantly filter our thoughts. We, day in and day out, we dwell on these thoughts as they dwell within us. So how do we filter our thoughts? Philippians 4:8 says, "Finally, brethren, whichsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things." We need to scan each thought that comes into our mind. Is it true? Okay, it might be true. Just because something is true doesn't mean we need to sit and dwell on it. Is it honest? Well, maybe, but let's go a little farther down. Is it pure? Is it lovely? Is it of a good report? Nope. Doesn't pass the test. Then get rid of it. How do I get rid of it? Think of the things that are true. Think of the things that are honest. Think of the things that are pure. Think of the things that are lovely. Start praising God. It's pretty hard to dwell on yucky feelings and thoughts when I'm dwelling on Him. Negative thoughts will continue to come, just as each of these ladies have talked about here today. The issue is when we let them come and spend the night with us. I don't want you, any of you ladies, or myself, to spend one more night laying in bed and dwelling on thoughts that don't need to be in our head. You know the saying, "I'm all in my feelings." I really dislike that saying, and I've said it before. What's wrong with you today? Oh, I'm just all in my feelings. Poor me. Stop it. Your feelings lie to you. We can't trust our feelings, ladies, okay? You know how it is. From one thing to the next. That's why we've got to scan it. Is it true? Is it pure? Is it lovely? Can you imagine if we only let the best thoughts reside in our head, what would happen? We would truly have an available heart to God. And there's no end to what He could do through us. The last thing that I want to point out to us today is what happened with the widow woman when she made her heart available to God. It didn't just affect her, did it? It affected her family. I want us to get that in our head right now. What we do and what we don't do affects those who are directly connected to us. The sin that we have in our life, it affects those that we're connected to, whether we like it or not. The things that we get hung up on and sulk about for days, sometimes weeks at a time, it affects your children. We might think we're sly. And they might not always be able to pinpoint exactly what it is that's wrong with mom, but they feel it. The choice that the widow made, it did more than just feed her son for a little while. It completely saved his life. Ladies, we don't know what choices we are making or possibly not making today that are either saving our kids' lives or sabotaging their relationship with God. When we make our hearts available to God, there's no end to what he can do in our lives. What he does in our lives, it affects generations to come. I want to close with this story about a man in the Bible, somebody else who made their heart available to God. It's in 2 Samuel 6:11 through 12, and it says, "The ark of the Lord continued in, in the house of Obed Edom the Gittite 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed Edom and all his household. And it was told King David, saying, The Lord has blessed the house of Obed Edom and all that pertaineth unto him, because of the ark of God. So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed Edom into the city of David with gladness." Who is Obed Edom? Why be like him? His choices and his life led to blessings for not only himself, but his entire family. Obed Edom is first mentioned in the Bible just after the death of Uzzah for touching the ark of God. This happened during King David's first attempt to move the ark to Jerusalem. The ark of God was placed in the home of Obed Edom. He must have been a man of faith to allow this in his home just after God had killed someone for touching it, which broke one of the commands of the Lord concerning the ark. The ark of God remained with Obed Edom for 3 months, and the Lord blessed his household and everything he owned. When it came time to move the ark to Jerusalem, Obed Edom made a choice. He could have stayed where he was and lived off his past relationship with God, or move with the ark of God, staying in God's presence and in relationship with him. Obed Edom had a desire for the Lord and moved with God. His desire for the Lord caused him to do whatever it took to be close to the Lord. He became a gatekeeper, a musician, and a doorkeeper for the ark. Due to Obed Edom's desire and love for the Lord and his faithfulness, God begins again to bless and promote him. Obed Edom becomes a worship leader and is mentioned along with Asaph, the chief musician. Obed Edom and his 68 associates minister regularly before the Lord in worship, yet he still continues to keep the gate. Obed Edom is not only blessed in ministry and relationship with the Lord, his family is also blessed. God gives him 8 sons. His sons and grandsons also worshiped the Lord and were blessed by the Lord. They were all leaders, capable men with strength to do their work. There were 62 in all. Obed Edom, along with his other duties, was put in charge of the south gate, and his sons were keepers of the storehouse. Obed Edom, by his faith, attitude, and actions, created a legacy of faith and relationship with the Lord. The Lord was faithful back to him, establishing a legacy of generational blessings. Obed Edom had to pack up and physically move to stay in the presence of God. His desire for a relationship with God established a relationship not only for himself, but also for his children and his grandchildren. This relationship also established generational blessings for God for his family. Ladies, we're so blessed. For most of us, God's not asking us to move away to do his will. we can come into his presence anytime that we want to. Are you willing to do what it takes to make your heart available to him today? Are you willing to do what it takes to get out all the garbage, to stop letting the lies of the enemy, and sometimes just ourselves, like Sister McKee was talking about? It's either the enemy, it's our flesh, or it's God. And if I'm honest, sometimes I think we like to feed our flesh those lies, because then we can just sit and do nothing. And sometimes that's comfortable. We're more comfortable doing that than we are following after the will of God sometimes. I don't want that for my life. I want my heart to be available to God, to use me in whatever way he wants to use me, even if it's to go to Africa. I know that's not the will of God for my life. But I'm being serious here today, ladies. Are you willing? Okay, we've heard these great messages, how we can get our hearts right with God. But are you willing? Are you willing to make your heart available to God? Because it's not always convenient. It's not always when we feel like it. Right? God might call you to do something that you don't really want to do. He's done that to me before. He's taken me out of my comfort zone way more than I ever wanted to be. Are you willing to make your heart available to God? And if you are, there's proof in these people in the Bible that it's not just going to be for you, it's going to be for your children. When I make my heart available for God, my son sees that. And he wants to make his heart available. It's not just about me. It's about the generations that are going to come after me. So I want to ask you one more time. Are you willing to make your heart available to God? Anyone wants to come up and pray? The altars are open.
Made a way when our backs were against the wall and it looked as if it was over. You made a way, and we're standing here only because you made. Oh, you made a way when our backs were against the wall and it looked as if it was over. You made a way, and we're standing here only because you made. You move mountains, you cause walls to fall with your power. Perform miracles, there is nothing that's impossible, and we're standing